Okay, so hello everyone. So today I'm just going to run through some HTML forms and how they work and how we can construct them in HTML. So first off, what are forms? So form is a kind of HTML tag essentially. So HTML forms are used to gather information on web pages. So usually then that information then would be sent back to a server via like JavaScript, and then from there we have information that we can use or put into our database. So a form is an area that can contain form elements. So the syntax is usually an open bracket form, and then without that we'd have our parameters, and then we'd have our form elements, and then we close off the form with an open bracket / form close bracket. So some of the form elements that we can then include in here would be buttons, checkboxes, text fields, radio buttons, drop down menus, and so forth, which we'll be seeing there now in a bit. Other kinds of HTML tags that can be mixed in with these form elements then too, so like for more aesthetic reasons, or like if you want to have a header or over say a text field that says name, so that then the user knows what to say input into each of these text fields, or what the purpose of a button or a checkbox is. And then usually a form then is wrapped up at the end with a submit button. So then that information then when submitted will be then sent off to say your server. So the form parameters then tell JavaScript how to send the information to the server. So there's two different ways that we can send it. So you'll be seeing that in a bit. So we'll skip this. And then so now the form tag. So the form, so obviously the start of form, you need to open it up. So it's it's open bracket form, and then within there we have arguments, and then these arguments that you can include in here would be say action URL. So this specifies where to send the data when the submit button is clicked, so to whatever server or anything like that. Then we have method get. So form data is then sent as a URL from the form. So then this info will be appended to the end. So for example, if you only click submit and it has a method get, when you'll see that in the URL at the top, it'll have all the information within there basically. So this can be only used if the data is like all ASCII and no more than 100 characters. So this wouldn't be the most popular way of using it. So instead you'd use method post. So this form, the data is then sent in the body of the URL request, and it cannot then be bookmarked by like most browsers. And then we have target, so that this tells us where to open the page sent as a result of the request. So similar to how we'd set target on an anchor tag to open up on a new page or open up on the same page when clicked. We have then target blank, which means open up in a new window, and then we have target underscore top, which means to use the same window. So then we are going to look into our input tags. So most but all form elements use the input tag, which is usually defined by a type equals and then quotes, and then within there you say what type of input it is. So type can be a text, checkbox, radio, password, hidden, submit, request, button, file, or image. And then other common input tag arguments include the name, so the name of the element. So that will be used then to specify when you send over any information to your server what the name of that is. So for example, you go type text, and the name would be say name field, so that then when you send it over it's defined as the name field, and then we know whose name is what. Then we also have values. So the value of an element is used in different ways for different values of type. And then we have read only, so this value then cannot be changed. So that means then so basically it cannot be edited, so it's only that, so we can define that when it's sent. Then disabled we have, so that then basically user can't say input anything with this element. So you put this tag on, say, I don't know, if you have a drop down menu and maybe one of the features we can't select anymore, so then we click, and then we'd add disabled, so that then the user knows that this cannot be clicked. And then other arguments are defined for input tag but have meaning only for certain values of type. So in terms of text input, so how would we go about adding a text field to a document? So for a text field within our form, we'd have input followed by type equals quotations text. Then we want to define the name of this text, so it's text field, so then we put within quotes text field. And then we can then define a value of that text field. So like it's a predefined value. So this is a way that we can offer like incentives for users to click, or offer them maybe a bit more information so we know what this text field is for. So in this instance, we have just with an initial value. So that will then sit within your text field, and then when you click it, it'll go and you can type in whatever you need in that text field. We can then also have a multi-line text field. So instead of text now, we'd say open bracket, text area, name, text area, calls 24, rows 2. So this is just defining like how many columns and rows we have. And then we'd have then hello, which would sit in instead of say value in this instance, and then we'd have open bracket, close bracket, text area. So then straight away we have a whole text area there with a lot more space for the user to say type into and scroll up and down potentially. Other forms of text areas that we have is a password field. So within our input type, we then define that as password, and then that will hide any of the type that we type in there for security reasons. And then we can define the name of it, so text field 3, or we can say call it password, and then the value we can set it to secret so that we know when we submit it that it has to be kept secret. And then also it's just preoccupying that space there in the text field. So note that two of these use the input tag, and then one of them uses the text area. So just as we go along in this, I recommend just populating a form with all these different elements and understanding how they work. So then when we have like our one-to-one, or when we start chatting there later on Skype, that you can go like say pull these up on screen and we can go through them if you have any like problems with them. So buttons. So buttons are obviously an important part of a form. So we have 3 essential different buttons that we can use. We have a submit button, so that would usually sit at the end. So it'll be input type, and then the type will be submit. And then we can name our button and give the value of whatever it says within that button. So that would usually be used when you want to send off the form. We also have a reset button, so type reset, and then name submit to, value reset. So say exactly the same as the submit button, but this time a reset button would clear the form for you. And then we can also just have a plain button, so we can then with JavaScript or whatever get that plain button to do something for us. Whether if you click it, it shows more information, or say to push other forms of data through to like a database. So submit is to then send data, restore all form elements to their initial state would be reset, and then button would just take some action as specified within our JavaScript. And then note that the type is input and not button. So they are buttons. Now we have checkboxes, so a lot of these follow the same sort of format. So for a checkbox, we go input type, checkbox, name, checkbox, value, checkbox, and then checked at the end, so that means it's checked. If we want to say have it unchecked, you'd say unchecked, or leave it vacant, and then it should display what you can see here below on screen. So the type for a checkbox is checkbox, which is pretty straightforward. The name used is to reference this form element from the JavaScript. The value is then to be returned when the element is checked, so it would be checkbox. And note that there's no text associated with checkbox. You have to supply the text in the surrounding HTML. So that would be say within a div, and then within that div you'd have input type. You'll have an example at the end of these slides then of what say a populated form will look like altogether. So then radio buttons, which are usually good for say when you have like two options. So in this example, if someone's say submitting a form to register for a website, so they have to like decide like are they male or female, or they probably already know. So then you'd have for this section you have input, and then the type would be radio, and then name be radio button, and then value could be my value 1, but you can define the value as whatever you want. So in this case here you could also go value male, and then for value 2 could be female, and then the user then can click whichever one and then move forward with the form. So if 2 or more radio buttons have the same name, the user can only select one of them at a time. So that's why here you can see name radio button and then name radio button. Whereas if we had radio button 1, radio button 2, it'd mean that we could select both of them at the same time, which would be bad practice since we only want them to say pick one or the other. So this would be used, this is how we go about grouping say a set of radio buttons together. So if you ask for a value of that name, you'll get the value specified for the selected radio button. So for example, the first one will be my value 1 and my value 2. As with checkboxes, ready buttons do not contain any text, so any of the surrounding text would then be HTML. So then we have drop-down menus. So you're all probably familiar anyway with forms and how they work. So drop-down menu is pretty self-explanatory. When we click on, say, the item, it will then reveal like several options. So in this case, if we were to put this code here for a drop-down menu in a form, when we click it, it would show red, green, and blue as the options. So how do we go about creating a drop-down menu or list? So what we do is we create a select name, or select kind of, we use select HTML tags. So we open bracket select, and then we give it a name. So in this instance, we're naming it select, and then closing the bracket. And then within there we'll have our options. So in this case, we have our 3 options. So it'd be option, and then we give it a value, and then we close that option tag off, and then they're put in red. So that's what's going to display for the user. So in this case, it would show red, as you can see below. And then we'll close that off. So the bracket / option close bracket, and then we follow that on with option value green, and then option value blue, and then green and blue within each both, and then we'd then close off the bracket with the closing of the option tag. And then once we've have all of our options in there, so we can obviously have a long list of different options if we wanted. Usually it's a good idea to keep things minimal here because it's a form, so we want to keep the user engaged and not have them scrolling for ages through like long lists. But once we have our lists established, then we can close off essentially the drop down menu list with the close select tag there at the end. So additional arguments that we can add here is size, so the number of items visible in the list. So a default is 1, so as you can see there, that's the default, only shows 1. But say we have a longer list and we want to preview, say, more options, we can then set that size to be bigger, so that will go in the select tag at the top, so we select and then size, and then you define the size you want. And then multiple, so if set to true, any number of items may be selected, and then if set to false, usually it's defaulted to false, but you can also select it to be defaulted to false. That means they can only pick one. So for example, if we had an option of, let's just take your standard, like if you're ordering food and you want to add toppings to a pizza, you'd have a drop down menu, and then in your select name, or in your select tag at the top, you'd have multiple, and then you have that equal to true. And then that means then within there you could select multiple different toppings to add to your pizza, say for example. And that's how that works. We can also then include hidden fields. So hidden fields were more for us as the developer and for the backend. So essentially we can have hidden fields in the form with certain values. So here you can see an example. So to create a hidden field, you go input type equals quotes hidden. Then we name the hidden field, so obviously here's hidden field, and then we define the value. So that value will be then sent back to our browser. Then we define the value and be submitted via JavaScript then. So you can see here it doesn't actually show anything in the actual field itself, because around this we have HTML, so we have right there, you don't see it, so it's empty. So what is this good for? All input fields are sent back to the server, including hidden fields. So this is a way that we can include information that the user doesn't need to see, or that you don't want them to see. So the value of a hidden field can be set programmatically by JavaScript before the form is submitted. So it just makes our life a bit easier if we want to get, say, a specific value based on if the user, say, did or didn't do something within the form. So then here's an example of a complete kind of form. So you can see what it would look like there on the right. So it has a title of who are you, and then we have a text field saying your name, so you type in your name, and then you have the gender options with the radio buttons. So what I'd recommend is that for this, maybe copy and paste this into the browser, have a play with it, understand how it works, and then start working through some of these other options here. The radio buttons, the checkboxes, buttons, and then text fields, and then build a form. So if you want an example, even go and find a form online. So like there's loads of Google Forms, etc., and maybe just try and copy one of those, include the buttons for like submitting and stuff, and just get an idea of how you go about structuring and then styling a form would be best. And then also there's another example here. which is jotform.com. So if you click in there, I think they have a few good exercises that you can work through, and it just gives you a bit more insight into forms. So yeah, that is forms for you. So I'm going to upload this slide along with other information and everything onto Moodle for you, and then we'll be having one-to-one Skypes where I'll be running through your projects. We can run through these slides or any other, I suppose, HTML, CSS stuff that you have any queries about, and we can take it from there.